boom bum ba boom bum, a boom boom ba ba dum bum ba boom bum ba boom bum boom ba dum boom boom ba boom bum ba.
Okay. Okay, so all that struggle. Uh, we are just want to repeat the fourth line from the bottom, Kufayin Gimel. We are saying that the oil that comes after the tzimtzum, even that which comes after the tzimtzum, even though the tzimtzum has a profound effect on this oil and actually transforms it in an oil that becomes be'erach oilamis, which we explained the other day, that it can relate to worlds and there's some kind of a similarity. Mikomo koin still this is drawn from the Ein Sof Shel Pnei HaTzimtzum. This is what we struggled about yesterday, the morning and in the evening. Nimshach me'ho Ein Sof Shel Pnei HaTzimtzum means that in fact the Ein Sof Shel Pnei HaTzimtzum is the initiator of this soil. This is what makes it possible. This is what facilitates it. Not to confuse the terminology with the idea that ultimately its remote source is from there, but then it becomes something different. But in fact, this is where it's drawn from, and this is what it stands for. This is what its brightness is about. The representation of the Oyes of Pnei HaTzimtzum. V'negeya v'dovuk boy, and it negeya, it touches it. V'dovuk, it not only touches it, it's dovuk in it. It actually cleaves to it, meaning that it constantly, by virtue of its own presence, it is bringing down this Oyes of Pnei HaTzimtzum. V'im kain, okay, now we continue further. V'im kain, and therefore. Harei hu me'ein bechinas atzmos oil in sof shelifnei hatzimtzum. Thus, the oil that is after the tzimtzum is even there. It is me'ein. It is of the eye, of the shine, of the bechina of atzmos oil in sof shelifnei hatzimtzum, of the bechina of that which is profoundly unique to Atzmos Oil and Sof Shel Pnei HaTzimtzum. And this oil afterwards, after the Tzimtzum, still retains that unique quality.
That or is only present in, it's not present in the world at large, it's present in the Shamas Yisrael.
That oil is present everywhere. Mm-hmm. In the Shamas Yisrael, it is manifest. That's what the Shomer Yisrael stands for. And Torah, that's what Torah stands for. In the world, it is concealed. But it still remains in essentially the same. In the world, it becomes established in Kelim, and the Kelim conceal it, and so forth. But nevertheless, the essential thing remains. That aspect is, I said it's not readily manifest, but nevertheless, if you think about it, then you can recognize it. There is a at the moment it's a letter or a note from the Frierdiker Rebbe to the Rebbe, going back in Europe, where the Rebbe writes to the Rebbe, he writes that the Rebbe was writing some kind of a journal then, I don't remember what it was, I wasn't clear even at that time what it was, that ultimately, everything that exists has an element of infinity. It would behoove us to be able to demonstrate it.
This is what you wrote.
Yeah. It's bli gvul. In our talking, our discussions, we have mentioned many times the principle that matter, which cannot be anything lower than that, anything more worldly than that, and yet it cannot be destroyed. What's the principle behind that? How do you understand it from a worldly perspective? In other words, we said before, okay, I don't want to confuse anybody. For those to whom this will clarify things, I'll give them a little bit of a handle. We said before that as a result of the tzimtzum, the oil becomes be'erech ha'ilmus. What does be'erech ha'ilmus mean? Be'erech means in proximity, similar to the world. Has a world acquires a kind of definition that is similar to world. And in what sense is it? That it comes into being. Now, following through on that, anything that comes into being can go out of being. That's a simple logic. And this comes into being, and it cannot go out of being. You cannot destroy it. What does that mean? That even though, yes, within the world, the relationships, structure, everything has to come into being. But when you focus in on the existence of the world itself, it doesn't come into being. It's a reality. You can't even project the possibility of being destroyed. It cannot be destroyed. Why? On the worldly level, of course it can be destroyed. Because there's an element that is not worldly, that is infinite. Within that finite, within that erech ha'ilmus, within that presentation of the erech ha'ilmus, there is an element, there is a core that is indestructible. Because it's infinite. But its infinity is so concealed that it allows to create a world, a relative world. Okay, now we pursue further at the end of the third line from the bottom. This is addressing the principle that just now I finished saying, that there was a tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum has a profound effect on the world, on the oil that comes after the tzimtzum. And yet, the oil that comes after the tzimtzum is still similar to the oil that came after tzimtzum. Addressing this principle of the tzimtzum, v'hagam, although the b'teira eir pashas vayero, the entire air, Pashas Vayero di Brahmas Posach Eliyahu, Kosa. This Maimer Posach Eliyahu, entire air. Just to make the point, we mentioned, I think last time also, Posach Eliyahu is a Maimer in Tero Eir and Pashas Vayero. It's a Maimer that takes up a couple of columns, not extremely long Maimer. On that Maimer, there is a whole booklet from the Rebbe Rashab when he dissects and digests every word in the Maimer because of the deep content in there. And it was now printed. In my days when I was in Shiva, it was mimeographed. Now it is in print. So he says over there, the Inyan had Tzimtzum hu, that the principle of the Tzimtzum is Bechinas Hefsek, is an element, an aspect of a Hefsek, of interruption. Yoiser, more, a greater degree of interruption, Me'inyan ha-parsa, than the principle of the parsa. The parsa, there is a tzimtzum in the parsa. So the Rebbe does not explain it over here, of course, assuming that we really know what the parsa by the time we learn this. Parsa, the tzimtzum, this is what enables the whole Seder Hishtalshelus, the kav. And we said that the Oyer Shelifnei HaTzimtzum was an Oyer that is not Be'erech Oilams, that cannot relate to worlds altogether. In this kav that's Nimshach after the Tzimtzum, there are two parts of the Oyer. There's the Oyer HaMamale and Oyer HaSoivev. So the Oyer Shelifnei HaTzimtzum is not Oyer HaSoivev. It cannot relate to worlds altogether, whether it's in the Soivev form or in a Mamale form. And as we pointed out and explained when we learned this particular thing, how Mamale relates to Soivev. So we pointed out Soivev is also a Kol Le'am, also has a Shachas to world. And this is why it affects Mamale. Lifnei HaTzimtzum is not Mamale, is not Soivev, it has nothing to do with world altogether. And then was a Tzimtzum. This is what the Tzimtzum was. And that facilitated the possibility of Adam Kadmein, and then the whole Seder Ishtalshelus, or the Kav. Then, the end of the Kav is Atzilus. Atzilus is still Elokus, still retains, so to speak, the primary reality of godliness. From Atzilus, coming into Biyah, into a created world, which is literally Yesh Mi'ayin. It's a creation. It's a mitzias. It's based on it. Its primary representation is its mitzias, not godliness, not its source, but its own mitzias. In order to enable that, there had to be another tzimtzum, so that the oil of Atzilus is restrained, and a different kind of oil emanates in order to facilitate the creation of Biyah. This tzimtzum is not called a tzimtzum, it's called a parsa. Parsa. Parsa means separation, like separation, a distant separation, not a complete retraction.
Parsa is not like a curtain.
Oh?
Not a curtain.
Like a curtain, but it yes. Like a separation, but it is not a total removal, restraint of the earth. So so he says over there that Tzimtzum is more profound of a hefsek than Parsa.
So Parsa takes place in Biyah.
Between Atzilus and Biyah. Between Atzilus and Biyah. In order to facilitate the creation of Biyah.
Rabbi, you said before that the Spashas are before the Tzimtzum is what arose in Hashem's will to create the world. In the top of the page. And now we're saying that that's not even that doesn't even relate to worlds.
Right.
Is that not related to world, that it arose in Hashem's will to create the world?
This was Hashem will to create the world, and in order to facilitate that, there was the oir, and at that point there's no world. And then through the process of tzimtzum and so forth, the world was created.
We can't even call that sacred?
No. No, there is no worldly quality to it at all. There's a pasuk that says, the Chveidi, describing the world, he says, Chveidi berosi vitzartiv af asisiv. Berosi vitzartiv af asisiv, I made brio, yitzarti, I made itziro. Af asisiv, I also made asir. So he explained, why does it, berosi vitzartiv, is brosiv kama yitzartiv. When it comes to asisiv, it's separate. Even that, which means it's a new realm completely. Even though B'rei Asir is all part of Biyah. So this is similar to our own experience. We have three garments. We have Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. And we can readily recognize the primary difference between Machshava and Dibur and Maisa. Even though between Machshava and Dibur there is also a big difference. But Maisa is totally an external thing. That's the separation, the curtain that occurs between, that's called a break, a separation, even though Bria is likened to Machshava, but just to understand where such a break takes place, that even though it's all coming from the same nefesh, Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa, and clearly Machshava brings about Dibur, and through Dibur comes Maisa, and yet it's a special Dibur coming from Maisa is almost automatic, from Machshava is almost automatic. In order to bring it into Maisa, there has to be a special inspiration, special force that brings it into Maisa, to break through the barrier between Machshava Dibur and the Maisa.
That's a mashal from the parsa.
This is a mashal, right? I said Barsa is talking about on a higher level between, Atzilus and Bria, which is Machshava. But just to get us an understanding, what are we talking about this? What does it mean, a parsa? What does a break mean?
Because why do you need to have Dibur to do a masa? You need Machshava. Where is Dibur coming in?
All right. I'll answer your question because I'm the one who opened it up, the possibility, but really this is not the topic. In order that it should come into Maisa, the Machshava has to, even if there is no specific Dibur per se, but the Machshava has to be translated at a Dibur level. The difference in Machshava and Dibur is Machshava is very vague, it's just a general overview, and Dibur breaks things down into detail. And in order to do Maisa, you must have full detail. Like, for example, you want to go from place A to point B, you can think about it, you can speak about it, point A to point B. When it comes to Maisa, you have to take every step, you have to cover every last inch in order to bring it from this place to that place. You can't go from this place to that place. You have to cover every inch. And in order to do that, it has to go down to the Dibur level, where you say, okay, how do you accomplish this? And then you do it. All right, so in Pasuk Leo, he said, that Tzimtzum is a greater Hefsek than the Parsa. And what is the principle behind saying this? Where do we see that this is a bigger hefsek? The hare, for behold, mehuz ha'oyer shelamayla mehaparso. The very essence of the oyer that is above the parsa, mislabesh behaparso, is imbued into the parsa. The parsa is a separation. Nevertheless, what does the parsa receive in order to facilitate the revelation that comes after? The very reality of the oil that's before the parsa. We will discuss it in a moment when we get the whole message. Ma shein kein in hatzimtzum, whereas the hatzimtzum is different. Because the hatzimtzum is ho bechinas hisalmus ho'er, is the aspect of hisalmus ho'er, of the concealment of the oil. V'ha'adoroi. V'ha'adoroi means its absence. The tzimtzum has to affect such a break that affects a total absence of oil. Yisalmus oil v'ha'adoroi, that it's not there. And as the expression is, that there's quoted all the time from Eitz Chaim, that nase cholol umokim ponoi, becomes emptiness. Yisamus oil v'hadorei, there is no oil. Whereas in the parsa, even though there is a break, there isn't that moment where there is a total absence. It goes through a curtain, it goes through a process. But it's the very same oil that we see that there's there before. That is what's mislavish afterwards. And okay, so I'm just already going to present what is the principle, what is we trying to say. We're trying to say this, that by the parsa, the very oil that was in before can be mislabish in the parsa. Because it goes to the parsa, then it facilitates that it should become bri yitzir asiyah. But it's the same oil that preceded. Whereas in the tzimtzum, it's the same. Go back to the parsa. It's the same oil without having been absent. It is taking the air as it is and flowing through a parsa. In tzimtzum, there had to be a double step. Number one, first you have to remove the oil altogether, and then, as we learned, as we're going to see here again, reintroduce it into a facility, into a situation where there is none.
Is it just Tzimtzum Arishan?
You're talking about Tzimtzum Arishan.
It is not all. It is not all.
Yeah, that is the Tzimtzum, and this is the Pars. And therefore, that shows. Therefore, that means that the Tzimtzum is much more profound of a break than the Parsa. And if it is a more profound, therefore it's a completely different oil. Why do we say that the oil that comes after the Tzimtzum is also has the aspect of Etzem, of the Inisoiv, but it's a complete renovation. It's a complete break, not like in the past. And this is what the point is, to explain that particular that particular aspect? How do we say that it's the same oil even though there is actually a complete absence of it in context of the pars? But for us to understand this principle itself and say that in a parsa, the oil is the same oil except it goes through a curtain. Whereas in the tzimtzum, it's a complete tzimtzum. So, as usual, we don't want to just skip over it because we want to know what we're doing. So I want to put this in perspective and see if we can actually relate to these concepts. We said many times that there are the two koiches hanefesh of rotzen and oinig, and then there is the 10 koiches of chochma, stand on 10 koiches, chochma, bat, chavas, and chagas, and then followed by machshava, dibur, u'mais. These are essentially the three rungs that we have in a person. And we point out all the time that even though rotzen and oinig are also koiches hanefesh that are part of the structure of human beings, and yet when we describe the human being, we start from chochma on down. We don't include rotzen and oinig in terms of representation. This is the human being, and the reason for that is that rotzen and oinig are actually emanations of the nefesh itself. Like we discussed the other day when we talked about rotzen and atzmus. It's emanations of the nefesh itself. This is the nefesh expressing and speaking and revealing itself. It is not koiches. And that's what rotzen and oinig is all encompassing. The rotzen and nefesh is mislavish in the person equally, as it says, in the heel as in the brain. Everywhere there's a rotzen. This is the fundamental presence of the person. The koiches, on the other hand, each koyach has its particular place where it's gala, in the brain and the heart and in the feet and in the hand. Everything has, because it has a very specific presence and a very limited presence. Whereas rotzen is not limited. It is a presence of the nefesh. That's rotzen. So, and then we say, chochma is the view, is the recognition of the rotzen. Chochma is a translation of the rotzen at the conscious and intellectual level. Now, and then there is all the koiches, and that's mislavish further in machshava, dibur, u'mais. So now, if we would follow through a little bit and just reflect how rotzen comes into chochma, and how then further chochma, bina, v'das, and all things go into machshava. There is clearly a break between the koiches hanefesh and machshava, as there is a break between the rotzen and chochma. But they're very different kinds of breaks. Very peculiar because in time of it. While the rotzen is in function, it's not possible to view it from a chochma perspective. Chokhmah means, even though Chokhmah is, we say all the time, Chokhmah is like sight. Let's take the sight. Sight, you see the reality itself. But you have to be outside of it in order to see it. And there is that sensibly, and then where I'm, from my vantage point, this thing doesn't exist. It's not there. It exists by sight, but it's not here. I don't have the rules. Chokhmah sees what's in the rods very clearly, but it is outside of it. And if it is overwhelmed by rods, there is no chokhmah. You can't see it.
What? You can. When can you see it?
When you're outside of it.
When you're outside. No, when can't you see it?
When it's in full glory, when it's full revelation. Machshava is different. Machshava also there is a break, and you have to kind of reflect what it is that you are understanding, but you are drawing it straight from the Chokhmah itself. It is the Chokhmah that's mislabish in Machshava. Chokhmah is mislabish in Machshava in a very unique way that's called Boragam Avrik, but then Bina is mislabish in Machshava in a much more palatable manner. But it's the very same Bina, the very same Seichel. It's not, there's no absence in the middle. In Machshava you sense what the Seichel is saying.
That's Parsa.
So this is the parts.
But between Chokhmah and
In
Rotzain,
Jehovah no Ratzon, there's a total absence. Otherwise there's nothing to see. And now we have to interrupt and we'll reconvene in Mitchum, take it back. We start again on Sunday. Have a good day. We have to prepare for davening.
you see it from the outside, but the Rotzain does not become Nimshach into the Chokhmah.
That's right.
It's just the Chokhmah gets a sighting of, and a very pure sighting. The
What?
fact, such a pure sighting that it actually gets, the Rotzain gets transmitted somehow. Right?
The truth of it, not its
Not
experience.
it's not the same Mahus.
No.
It's not the same Mahus. But by Machshava and Chokhmah, it's the same Mahus.
Yeah. So the senses what the Chokhmah is. In order for the Machshava then to reform it itself, to be able to produce it, it's a whole retranslation of the Chokhmah.
That's still called Nimshach?
What?
It's still called Nimshach?
Then,
It's still called Nimshach from there, though.
yeah, because you're translating that which you understand in which have Machshava into Diva.
And it still Chokhmah is Nimshach from Rotzain?
Chokhmah is not Nimshach from Rotzen.
How do we
Machshava is Nimshach from Chokhmah.
Then how do we say that the Or that's after this, even the Or L'Ha'ir is Surah
Oh.
I'm saying it's like
Okay. So that first we explain. You're talking about Nimshach in a very specific manner. That will get back to. Just to explain the difference between Tzimtzum and Parsa. You can't confuse everything together. Huh?